Yeah, I'm also, I'll give it to you turned on. Yeah. Yes, it's good. Yes, thank you. We'll see after. Oui. Uh-oh. But c'est...
We start here.
C'est à son... Yeah, it's a read, yeah. Yes. Oui, en effet.
Just giving everyone a 2-minute warning. Welcome, everyone. I think we're going to get started. Yeah, feel free to sit wherever there's not a reserved sign.
Je veux juste dire à la personne qui a mis, voilà, il y a un bout de texte qui flotte par terre. Je suis désolée, c'est juste que si vous mettez sur mon texte, ça va être difficile pour que moi je fasse la lecture pour vous. Oui, oui, je vais me poser là, mais avec ce texte. C'est juste, mais c'est ma présence. Du tout. Je ne veux juste pas poser de sac dessus, c'est tout. Merci.
Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. So again, if you haven't been here, welcome to Action Théâtrale Caribéenne, the Caribbean Theatre Project at Martin Segal Theatre. We want to thank you for being here. There was a snowstorm warning earlier, so our crowds are a little bit smaller than we had hoped, but we're glad that you are here. We also want to recognize the French Cultural Services who's here, Laurent is here, and of course Nicole Birmann, who contributed a lot to this event. What we're about to see right now is a work by Jean-René Lemoine, L'Adoration or Adoration in English. Jean-René Lemoine was born in Haiti in 1959. He's a French-Haitian playwright who lives in Paris, trained as an actor in Paris and Brussels. He's the author of 10 plays, which were awarded several prizes, including the Fondation Beaumarchais and the Académie Française Awards. Lemoine's works have been staged in many locations, including in national theaters in Paris. And the director of this stage reading is Sylvaine Guyot. She's a professor of French literature at Harvard University. Her research focuses on 17th century theater and performance practices with emphasis on the representation of the body in early modern France. Let's see the work.
China and Rodez come from elsewhere. It does not matter which country. What matters is that they were born else on the empty terrace. The man has a bandage on one hand.
Mais ce regard que vous m'avez lancé, that look, the look that you gave me, that look was full of desire. Stop right there. Don't move. Nothing will happen to you. So long as you stay within the halo of my sight, nothing will happen to you. Do you feel the wind moving through the leaves, bringing some relief after the hot afternoon? There are wrinkles on your face. Well, they're barely even wrinkles because you still look like a child. They speak of a terrible weariness, a great fatigue. They tell a tale of dread. They say you haven't been touched enough, caressed enough through all those years of your life. In fact, I don't even know how old you are.
Is that really important?
It's important for me to tell you. If I were to stop speaking, I might throw myself off into that void over there. So devouring, so tempting. I'm sorry, I have to. Well, I had to speak to you, to tear you away from all those people. We had to talk. Il fallait que nous parlions. We had to talk.
We've already said so much, said so many things.
We have to talk again, but differently, with patience. The words have to go from me to you, and they have to reach you, and you must not refuse them. You must not be frightened of them.
Why do you think they would?
Oh, they do frighten you. But not only my words, not only the ones I am saying, but I am barely whispering because I'm exhausted, because it is dreadfully, shockingly late. These words that fortunately are lifted by the breeze and carried from me to you like butterflies. But also your words, the ones that you don't dare to say, the ones that you. There is something infinitely feminine in you that
I'm gonna go.
Why? Why did you come? Why?
I don't know. I don't know why I'm here.
Music is heard from inside. They fall silent.
But when you looked at me the first time, just before we were introduced to one another, that long look, ce long regard between you and me, don't tell me that it wasn't charged with desire.
Why bring it up? Why talk about it? Why rehash it?
And the next day, at 4:35, when we met again, when you entered my life asking me where my pain came from, d'où venait ma douleur, the immense pain that you had perceived from the first instant that you saw me, that pain, cette douleur, that you wanted to discuss even though I didn't want to, and even though I had a terrible desire to surrender myself to you. The next day, when we spent the evening talking, you talking, and me trying not to tell you what you wanted to hear, what you already knew, when we were sat together next to one another, almost touching. What did you want? What did you desire? You had no desire, perhaps. You don't answer? You lower your head. I can't bear for you to lower your head. I can't bear the violence of your silence anymore. Speak, for heaven's sake. Speak, scream, shout, slap, but do something. Do something that would put an end to it. Don't leave me. Please. In this deadly in-between, in this uncertainty, this doubt, this unbelievable wait for you to say a word, un mot, un seul mot, that would condemn or exonerate me as soon as I heard it. You want to make me believe that I dreamt it, that all of it was, has been, that all of it was only a dream. You keep pushing the boundaries until my reason falters. Why hound me like that? Answer me. Answer me. Why this assassination? Why do you keep looking at me, murderer, as if I were the one driving the spears in one after another, as if I were the one galloping circles around you, rearing back, stopping brutally to stab you again, to make you bleed out the thick garnet of your substance, when it is you who hunted, tracked, stalked, and imprisoned me in the seething chains of your eyes and the evil clasp of your fingers. And I have to I have to gather what's left of so that I don't go to pieces in front of you. At least not until I've said it all, clarified it all. Because tonight, we must say everything in the heat and in the wind.
They remain still, silent statues.
How long did you spend next to me? Do you remember how many hours you spent at my place? Standing or sitting, talking? Your inquisitor's body carving slow, swirling lines that made the room smaller and made you larger. You knew the turmoil. You knew the earthquake that went off inside me, but you kept on. You kept asking me where my suffering came from. D'où venait ma souffrance? I didn't want to. I refused to tell you. How could I have said it? I had spent my whole life trying to hide it, to mask it, and you thought, bold, that you could blow it up in an instant, the shiny carapace of my life. What did you say? What did you say that night? You kept on repeating the word suffering. Souffrance, souffrance, souffrance. And I kept repeating inwardly, let him stop, let him stop, let him stop, let him stop, qu'il se taise, qu'il se taise, qu'il se taise, oh God, let him stop. Or I'm going to scream. And then you came over to me, very close to me. You didn't touch me, you didn't even brush against me, but I didn't know. That is your habit. I didn't know yet that this was your fiendish habit. So I spoke to you about desire. I told you that there had been desire between us from the first moment that we looked at one another. before that person who was supposed to introduce us ever introduced us, I told you that the look, ce regard, that I gave you or that you gave me, how to know who committed the first offense, that this look had been so long that we had been obliged to speak to break the tension somewhat. And then you said that that look, ce regard, on that night, on that terrace, hadn't been the first look, that there had been one before, the very first look. The real first look in the love crime. I'm sorry, I have to stop. That music. That music makes me want to drown myself.
Silence.
You said, and I had to admit it, wondering to what inexpressible nightmare I had relegated it. You said that it was inside that we had looked at each other, but that this look, ce regard, had been swift as a slash, bright as lightning, un éclair. And all of a sudden I remembered, and I told you that you were right, that it was only later that that this second look happened. The one that, in my terrible unconscious, I had christened as the first. I told you because everything was becoming clear and transparent like the ocean gulfs of our countries. I told you that after this original look, I went out onto the terrace to join some friends that I had seen through the window. But suddenly I realized it was you, and only you, that my desire was following. Unconscious, ghost-like. I went out onto the terrace thinking I was finding my friends, but it was really only to find you. You and nothing but you. Vous et rien que vous. You were sitting alone amidst some people who suddenly I identified as friends, but who were really only accomplices. Unmoving tombstones who, unbeknownst to them, would help me to cross the ford. It's appalling how right you were that evening when you were telling me about the day before. And suddenly it all came back to my mind like a tide crashing in, and that was when I remembered talking to my friends like a sleepwalker talks to the trees when she loses her way in a garden, or to the birds when she's walking softly on a roof. I remembered talking to my friends, and then I gave you a long, drawn-out look, at once so pure and so indecent that we had been obliged to speak. And then I said to you, or you said to me, I don't remember who launched the attack.
I believe we've met before.
Je crois que nous nous connaissons.
I believe we've met before.
Je crois que nous nous connaissons.
I believe it was you.
Of course, it wasn't true. We had never met before. But to act as though we had, to remember as though it were a real past, as though we had already met, it made the situation bearable. We could keep looking at one another through the words without my friends worrying to see us standing silent for so long in the hot air of that afternoon. It was you. I think you were the one who said it.
What did I say?
Je crois que nous nous connaissons. I think it was you.
I believe that we've met. It was you, perhaps?
No. And then that friend arrived, the friend who was supposed to introduce us to one another, and she said, surprised.
We've already met.
So we smiled, we lied, we said, yes. We told her that we had met before, and I've forgotten the rest. It was how do you say, until you asked me for a meeting, un rendezvous, under the false pretense that maybe, but that maybe had already come and gone, que nous travaillions ensemble, that we would work together. And we agreed to meet at my place the next day. And the next day you were at my place at 4:35, late by 5 minutes, which drew themselves out so that they seemed to me like 5 weeks. And at 9:35, you were still there after 5 hours of bliss. Let's call it bliss. Du bonheur. Hours so short that they seemed to me like 5 seconds, asking me to tell you where my suffering came from, ma souffrance, to tell you everything. It's true that one could call it bliss. At least, it was the only time that you were ever gentle to me. After, it was only murder, or almost. and you sat, oh, so close to me, and you knew that you acknowledged that our first 2 looks, now so perfectly elucidated, had been absolute looks of desire. And you stayed there, motionless, while storms battered my insides, and I looked around for something to hold on to as the walls started to crumble little by little, so that I wouldn't be swept away in the earthquake that I've already told you about.
We can hear
The sea.
the sea.
Don't move. Don't move. Do not move. I'm telling you not to. No. Don't move. Of course, there was someone, quelqu'un, in your life. It's always the same. There's always someone, quelqu'un, in the life of the person who should have entered ours. But what did it matter to me then? You had already entered mine, never to leave again. I wasn't expecting anything. I thought I no longer expected anything. I was content to count the seconds, to photograph each instant, because if, like me, you have a vast experience of emptiness and adversity, and then suddenly you recognize the glowing warmth of a moment that will mark you forever. You steal every fragment of gesture, every syllable uttered, so that you can project them for a long time, for weeks, even years after, onto the screen of memory.
Silence.
Tornado of words. Hurricanes, like they give names to in our countries. That one I call after you. Rodez, 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 Rodez. That one I name after you. I'm at a loss for words. I'm so overcome by the vertigo of you. Yes, that's it. Tonight, we have to have everything out between us. And tonight, I will not abandon you, and you will not abandon me either until we have said it all. Until we have annihilated each other in the passion and spit of words for lack of anything else, because there is nothing else, and to hear your silence, there never was. Have we? Confess. Rodez, confess it. I'm begging you, confess that you are on the brink. That you can't take it anymore, that you're like me, lost, alone, a flimsy little boat out on the... You're crying.
Silence.
Then you took your leave. You went home, where certainly someone, quelqu'un, was waiting for you. Or did you perhaps go somewhere else? Yes, that's it. Someone, quelqu'un, was waiting for you somewhere else. You were even quite late because you had lost track of time, unaware of the danger posed by your presence in my apartment, and for those 5 too short hours, unable to decide to leave. Yes. Yes. So you left, not without scribbling down your phone number, which I didn't have yet because naturally, as always, I was the one who had given you mine and my address as well, at the risk that you wouldn't come and I would die suffocated by waiting for you. And then I told you that I wouldn't call you, I would rather that you call me, que vous m'appeliez. And you slid into my arms for a swift embrace. I leaned against your shoulder, but you already seemed to be escaping, and you looked at me, and I held your gaze until you lowered your head, because we both already knew that I had gone far beyond the pale of this story, in which all you had to do was come and go in your violating, exhausting way. I can't tell you the emptiness of my apartment after you had left. The sudden desire to break the rule that I myself had set, to call you, wherever you might be in the hostile city, in the place where they were keeping you hostage, so that I could implore you to come back to me at once, because of course, from the moment that you had stepped through my doorway, I accepted the fact that I could not live without you. How can I tell you about the days that followed? Me, in despair, by the telephone, like some heroine in a melodrama, making smaller and smaller circles around the telephone, reaching out my hand, brushing over, dialing the first few numbers, thinking better of it, dialing again, waiting hours on end for you to call, jumping whenever it would ring, trembling, stumbling, hesitant, desperate, letting the first few rings go, finally picking up, speechless, all my strength gone, only to realize that it wasn't you. It was someone else. Sitting down so as not to be overcome with nausea, trying to reassure the person on the other line who was startled to hear this voice suddenly become so gloomy, stitching my words back together with great difficulty, interrupting the intruder, cutting short the conversation until I clumsily hung up the receiver so that I could wait some more. Wait. Attendre-vous, et rien que vous. Wait for you. And nothing but you. How can I tell you about how those nights I would come home exhausted but pulsating? I would rush over to the first beloved, then detested answering machine, and you hadn't called. Me, foolish Madam Butterfly, strewn across the white bedspread, fully dressed, made up, staring at the ceiling like a still breathing Ophelia. That ceiling like the endless foam of our countries, exiled from myself, wild with rage, nursing the insult of not being reached, not being desired, me, abandoned, forgotten, consigned to the attics of your memory, wiped from your galaxy, definitively erased. Oh, if you knew what I had to suffer. Passent les jours et passent les semaines. You didn't call. And then naturally, ineluctably, I found an excuse. I was playing at the theater. Therefore, I had to invite you. I had to invite you because I was playing at the theater. You would have held it against me if I had deprived you of my art. And of course, I felt calmed, fulfilled, satisfied, dispossessed of you from the moment that I had a reason to call you. I had mourned you, and I even let 24 hours pass before phoning you. Your voice was deep, smooth, and calm on the telephone. Your phrase is carved into my heart. You said,
I didn't know if I should seek you or avoid you.
Je ne savais pas si je devais vous chercher ou vous éviter. That is what you said. Isn't it true that you said that?
Yes, perhaps.
What does that mean, perhaps?
Yes, of course.
Did you
Yes.
say it, or didn't
I
you?
must have.
Well, answer me. No, I'm asking you to answer me.
Let's go inside.
No, go inside if you like. I'm staying. I cannot go inside.
China, I'm tired.
I'm tired too.
China, it's late.
I'm dreadfully late.
So let's go inside, please.
I can't.
Let's go inside.
I can't, Rodez. I can't go in. Don't you understand that I can't go inside?
But you aren't going to stay there forever, for eternity. China, I don't know if I should seek you or avoid you. I don't know if I should seek you or avoid you.
If you knew
I don't
what I had to suffer.
if I should seek you or
You came to see me at the theater.
avoid you.
You congratulated me. You had that carnivorous smile. You were neither trembling nor worried, nor exhausted. You said some coherent things. Then suddenly, during the conversation, a hand grabbed you and you turned around slightly and you abandoned me there, while a hand that wasn't yours placed itself on my shoulder and a mouth kissed my cheek. Someone said something to me and I, champagne glass in hand, responded like an automaton to the fingers and mouths that had just abducted me. And I tried to hear the words that you were saying. They came to me in bits from far off, so far. I was trying to follow you with my eyes, but you were pulling away from my shores, carried by the tides that I couldn't. It was impossible for me to. I couldn't understand why you weren't coming back to me of your own free will, with the strength and the power of your body. I realized that you had simply come to watch me, and that now that you had seen me, you felt free to go. And then for a second, you were so far away from me. At the other end of the lobby, our eyes met, and you smiled at me. So I stopped drinking and when I took you in my mouth, avouez, confess it, Rodez. I'm begging you, at least confess that I'm not lying, that I'm mistaken, that it's all true, because the longer I listen to you say nothing, the longer I get the sense that nothing happened. My reason starts to falter the longer I listen to you not speaking. Speak to me, Rodez. Tell me.
The sound of the sea. Silence.
Let's go in.
But no, I don't want to. I don't want to go inside.
All of this is
useless?
absurd.
Useless and absurd to you, Rodez. Useless and absurd to you. Inutile et dérisoire. You're the one standing motionless on the shore while I'm drowning.
Let's go inside.
All right, go in. Go in. Go inside. Allez, rentrez, rentrez, rentrez. Go inside since you want to go inside.
They look at each other frantically.
I have a fever, China. Will you stop hounding me?
I can't help it. I've already told you, I'm on fire too. But remember that it was you. You were the one who called me back after. You called me this time on some false pretense, but in truth, because you felt lonely. Because the one whose life you shared had suddenly slipped away. You were vague on that subject. And I, as usual, I didn't ask any questions. And we stayed on the telephone a long time as you told me that l'être qui partageait votre vie had abruptly
vanished.
And you were
Lost.
You implied that you wanted my presence, so of course, I ran to your rescue. Well, I wasn't going to rescue you, but to meet you, see you, contemplate you. My heart was beating out of my chest the whole of the journey that separated me from you. I arrived at your place, you opened the door, you were beautiful. You needed me. I sat down. I didn't know how deep I had sunk in by letting you pour your sorrow into me. I could no longer hide my disastrous transparency. I felt my 40-year-old body become heavy in front of your vigor. I dared to talk to you about us. Nous. You said some vague things. You said that the time would come that
The river always runs its course.
some ridiculous things, inept, cruel, ridiculous and cruel things. I took a long walk in the street, full of the memory of you. That night after the theater, I was roaming around your neighborhood. It was midnight. I called you. You told me that you would prefer it if I didn't call you so late. That is what you told me when a few hours before I had rushed to your salvation, you threw that in my face and I hung up. 3 minutes past midnight by my watch, the cars speeding along the boulevard, and I started to cry. In the taxi that was taking me home, I said to myself, it was better for everything to be finished between us because my folly, my dissolution had no limit. And then I cried myself to sleep like a teenage girl who has been cut for the first time. You feel the wind moving through the leaves. Rodez?
Yes?
Rodez,
Yes.
I swear to you that after that I wanted to flee. I swear it, Rodez, that I attempted to flee. Why did you call me back again? Why? Tell me why.
I don't know why, but I admired you. I wanted us to work together.
Why do you keep avoiding it? Why don't you just admit the brilliant, tragic fact? We were drawn toward one another like a moth to a flame. You asked me to work with you. You told me to meet you
A rendezvous.
again at your place so that we could talk. Do you remember?
Yes.
And so I went to your place yet again, like a suicide who climbs back up 10 flights of stairs so that she can fling herself again down onto the pavement. But I thought, dare I say, I sincerely believed that I would be brave enough to tell you no. And in fact, I did tell you no. Non. I told you that I wouldn't work with you, que je ne travaillerai pas avec vous. And you asked me,
Why?
do you remember?
Yes.
And what did I say then?
I don't know.
I told you it was better for us not to work together, que nous ne travaillions pas ensemble. That I didn't have enough resistance within me to face your presence every day. And you, murderer, pretended that you didn't understand. You kept insisting that this meeting, ce rendezvous, was a simple transaction, and you blamed me for...
Withholding.
But I wasn't withholding, Rodez. I was saying plainly and freely that I was broken, sunk, enlisé, and that in order to keep from dying, I had to distance myself from you. Que je m'éloigne de vous. I had to. Go on and tell me that that wasn't what I said. I dare you. I told you that, Rodez, didn't I?
Yes.
Why didn't I leave? At that very moment. Thick with my sadness, mes chagrins, thick with the futility of everything, thick with 40 years, useless, of searching for you, years that led me painfully to you, in an exhausting pilgrimage, at the end of which I had to backtrack through the ruts at dusk to loneliness, to the drying up of myself and my beauty. It must have been because after you had plunged the first spears in, I wanted you to deliver the fatal blow. And so I offered myself up, perpetually still. How can I tell you? How can I describe for you my incredible awareness of that moment? Even while I stood apart from it, calm, clear, a stranger to myself, emptied of my guts, I saw myself falling endlessly without ever crashing down to that sea which would have taken me into its definitive immensity. But you, criminal, you clenched me in the grips of your smiles and your hatred because you hated me, Rodez. At that very moment, you hated me because at that very moment, I kept myself from you. You were no longer the one who could slip smooth and polished through my grasp, but it was me, or rather, a part of me that was escaping from the jaws of your... And yet we went out together into the light, and as in a dream, like one administers a drug, poison, you invited me to lunch, un déjeuner. And as in a dream, I heard myself say, oui, and I saw myself seated at the table across from you in that Indian restaurant. Do you remember?
Yes.
I was watching you sitting there, and watching you, I understood that you had to be alive because you were hungry, because you had a strength within you that I no longer possessed, a strength that let you send a dish back because it wasn't good, order another one, and eat it right in front of me. Oh, God. I should have step out of the ring, run away. I should have fled.
We hear the sea.
When I took you in my mouth, it happened at your place. Yes, again, at your place. Because after the restaurant, we went back to your apartment. I don't know what made me go there. Anyway, we stayed for a long time next to one another. You put some music on. I got up, I went over and stroked your shoulder. You told me that you didn't want me to caress you. que vous ne souhaitiez pas être caressé. So I stood still. No one said anything. I put on my summer coat, you and I at the door. I was looking at you, and you wouldn't look at me. And I couldn't help but think about the two of us a few weeks before. You opened the door, and I took a step out into the silence, and then suddenly I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I closed the door, and I took off the coat, which fell to the floor without a sound, and I started to caress you. You were saying no. You were telling me to stop, not to caress you, but I kept on. I unbuttoned your shirt, stroked your chest, your stomach. You kept murmuring unintelligible supplications while I undressed you. And then I took you in my mouth. I held it a long time. You tasted of salt. You were still, like a statue up against the wall, silent, undone. And a few seconds later, I don't know how, don't ask me how, we were on your bed, in your bedroom, and I finished undressing you. How long did I stay there, just caressing you? You made no movement whatsoever. Your gaze was elsewhere, far away, full of emptiness and fog and pained. My face was close to yours. I wanted to plunge my eyes into your eyes, my mouth into your mouth, but you were looking so much further off, and you refused my lips. Then, as in a dream, burnt alive, I put on my coat. I went down the stairs, and then all of a sudden I found myself once again like in one of those recurring nightmares in front of your building in the light. I walked back down the street, and then I don't know. I don't know anymore. Rodez. Rodez. Rodez, Rodez, Rodez. I'm going to have to tell you what you already know, but what I promised myself I would never say, what I had been hiding deep down in the bottom of my guts. Now it's coming back to the surface, dense and sweet, like an endless sacred spit. God, I have to tell you that I loved you. I loved you. I loved you. I loved you. Those are the only words. No, I loved you. 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 Rodez, forgive me. Please, forgive me. Tonight, I give up. I surrender. Lifeless, powerless, defenseless, powerless, lifeless, vanquished, defeated. I loved you. I'm saying it. The obscene. I'm saying it, the bitter cold of unrequited love. The disaster. I loved you, Rodez. Rodez, I loved you. I loved you. Je vous aimais, je vous aimais, je vous aimais. Je vous aimais. Do you understand? Those are the only words. There are no other words. Those are the only words. Ces mots-là. I loved you. There is nothing else, Rodez. No other words. Pas d'autres mots.
She sobs for a long time.
All of my body's tears. My sight is clouded. A widow's veil over my pupils. Close my eyes so as not to be blinded by you. Dream of infinity. They talk about a Christmas truce. I would like for you to come closer to me. I would like for you not to be afraid anymore. Do you feel the wind moving in the leaves? The smell of the sea. Bewitching. Gray tonight in the throes of its foaming. Sparkling. Abandoned. A hindrance to its own motion. Unrelenting and repetitive. I love you, Rodez. I have loved you. Did you get the roses? A few days later, I left. That friend came with me. We left the city. Un ciel lavé, sans un nuage, a harsh sun softened by the wind. I had sent you some roses. Did you get the roses with those lines by Aragon?
It is better to die than to love.
Il est plus facile de mourir que d'aimer. I stayed there, alone in that house, a long time, by the sea, with the sound of the sea, with no echo inside me.
The sound of the music from inside.
I heard about the accident. Who told me? How did I find out about it? Why have me informed? I called you. Your voice. Calm. On the telephone. You told me that a friend of yours had been
Killed in an accident.
You told me that, and you told me that you were
Unharmed.
that only your right hand had been.
The music again. Jolting. Captivating. They look at each other. Slowly their bodies meet. They dance, imperceptibly, without even touching. Little by little, the dance becomes more intimate. Their legs intertwine gently to the rhythm. Pressed against one another, they sway, their hips locked, moving in a slow, exasperated desire. She tries to kiss him. He refuses, gives in.
Stand up. Please, stand up.
No! No, 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 no. That sky, swaying above all of it. It's all dark above all of it, all black. They're dancing inside, the sweat been dancing all night. You hear them dancing, China. A ship that pitches and keeps pushing along, crushing the swell. No! No! Leave me alone. I have a fever. Did I tell you that I have a fever? Dawn is here, ready to break, and I'm asking for a reprieve. Give me one more piece of darkness. I'm not well. I am not well. I have always hated Christmas. The Christmas shoes, as you said, and even in the heat of our country tonight, I can't stand Christmas Eve. Don't say anything. Let me finish. No, I am here with the immensity of this sky and of this ocean that makes me nauseous and as my only horizon. And I can go no further nor back. Too tired to return to the crowd and the bodies stuck together in their desire. I'm not well, China. Do you understand? How did you know I was here? Who told you? By what uncontrollable fate did you find yourself here in France? How did you know I was here? Who told you? Migratory birds. I thought you were thousands of miles away from me. I thought you were in France on stage. Let me finish. I saw you. You had your back to me. I was watching the dancers move, and I saw you. Then you were swallowed by the mass of bodies, and I can't remember. I forgot what I wanted to say. A gentle sob like a rainbow's warm. It doesn't matter. But someone leaned over to me, but I didn't hear what he was whispering in my ear because the music was drowning out all the sound. Then I spotted you again, dancing in the middle of the crowd, lewd. A attached to that stranger, clutching him furiously to keep from sinking. I said to myself, it would be better for you and for me if I left before you noticed and I was there. But I couldn't, because I couldn't anymore. We had, by some immeasurable chance, washed up, both of us, in the nightclub by the sea, thousands of miles from France, in the middle of a long night. I saw you again in the sea. I mean, in the crowd. You were dancing with a different man. You were haughty, distant, indifferent to everything, focused on your secret, and suddenly your gaze pitched over toward me. And you stopped. You stood still in the midst of the crowd, and all you did was look at me. You came over to me. There you were in front of me with that black dress flowing around your body like a robe of light, and you asked me if I had received your roses. Of course. 1,000 roses, China. You sent me 1,000 roses. How can you reply to a woman who sends you 1,000 roses? What can you say to a woman who one day sent you 1,000 roses?
He weeps. Silence. The sound of the music.
What was I saying? What was I? Yes. I also left the next day after that. A friend came with me. I remember that too. How did you put it? Yes.
Ciel lavé,
Limpid sky,
un
not a
nuage,
cloud.
un soleil
Our sun softened by the
battable,
wind.
adouci par le vent,
The already
les
faded
couleurs
colors of the
déjà
end
éteintes
of a
de
French summer.
fin d'été de France.
Quiet
Chant
fields as
tranquille, la
far
perte
as
de
the
vue.
eye can see. And then the accident. What about it? What is there to say? What can I? There's nothing. I have no memory of it. I woke up in a room. I had a few bruises and a deep cut on my right hand, and they told me that the one whose life I shared had been
Killed.
Yes, I didn't react. Numbed, you understand? I looked at my hand, the bandage, a blinding white. There, that's it. Don't say anything. When I went home, I was walking slowly, carried by fatigue, and I found the 1,000 red roses. The caretaker had left them in front of my door. They had withered, 1,000 withered roses. Everything is so ludicrous, isn't it? Did you find it? Or don't you find it ludicrous? Are you cold?
Dizzy.
Yes. It is easier to die than to love,
C'est pourquoi je me donne le mal de vivre.
my love. I don't know, China. I don't know. I don't know anymore. You left me nothing. Only the husk, you see? Again tonight, I followed you out onto this terrace and you stole my night from me. You're probably right. You are probably right, China. But in the end, what does it matter? I don't see how any of that matters anymore. If the sun could just not come up, all of that would surely have meaning, but because the sun is coming up, because dawn is here, all of that is only sound and fury fading away, because now we must face that glimmer over there. And this long day that must be gotten through from start to finish, and then probably others broken up by the nights. It is true that we are like China, drawn toward one another like a moth to a flame, but is that a reason to? God, I'm so tired. You are so pale in this growing light of day, and God, I have nothing to say to you. In any case, nothing to add to what you have already said. My hand hurts and I can't catch my breath. This sudden freshness. We could almost be in France all of a sudden. Look at the sky, China. So still. Let's take the time because it's dawn. Because we will have to face the day. Let's take the time to look at this sky trembling in front of us. I am not well, China. I don't feel very. You are beautiful. Please, let's stay here. Please, together or apart, whichever you like. Let's stay here. Because now, startled by the daylight, struck through by the wind, we no longer have the strength to move. Let's stay here, China. You and me, let's stay here and look at the day as we can't help but to look at that day. Don't cry. Don't cry, China. Don't cry. Please, 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 China, don't cry. China. China. Will you stay next to me for a moment? Stay.
Merci, c'est gentil.
So I think we're going to start. We're going to turn it over to Amin Erfani, who's going to moderate the post-performance discussion.
Hello, is this working? Yes. Hello, everybody, and thank you for staying for this wonderful performance. And unfortunately, the playwright couldn't be here tonight. It seems that he was in Iran, and then they took his visa away from him, as they do in this country. But I believe that the performance tonight was very much in the spirit of Jean-René Lemoine, and we're going to talk about this. He was kind enough to send us a personalized letter, and that Josh here translated, and also an article. I'm sorry, Amanda translated, and Josh is going to read it, right? About Amanda's translation of the play, of course. And he also sent us an article of Le Monde about his recent article about his work. But since we are running a little bit late, maybe we can start with the letter and then continue with the questions.
Sure, okay. The letter is entitled Language as the Only Territory. When I was a teenager, my father worked in Kabul when there wasn't yet a war. So I went 2 years in a row to spend summer vacation with him, and I was dazzled by this country. I remember that I told my father I wanted to stay there. He refused because they did not have a French high school. He was absolutely determined for my education to be in French. Kabul did have an American high school, and that was where I dreamt of going. To speak another language, in this case English, which I had just begun to learn, seemed to me at that point in my adolescence an immense possibility of freedom. To leave my language and tame another appeared to me as a providential anchor point, like a mysterious raft that I had discovered in my exile, and on which I could invent for myself both an intimate language and a mobile identity. I was not able to convince my father, which was for a very long time a great regret of mine. Later, when I was about 20, I left for Italy, first Rome, then Milan, where I remained for 8 years. During those 8 years, I adopted the Italian language, or rather, the Italian language adopted me, like one takes in an orphan. Italy is where, at the age of 20, I began to write for the stage, in Italian. The sonority of that language is intimately connected with my apprenticeship of writing. The limitations of this learning process kept me from giving free rein to the virtuosity that I could rely on in French. It was only when I was at the heart of my ideas that I could find the words, and those words were, by necessity, simple and precise. Then I went back into my native language, French. I reconquered it when I chose Paris as a new adoptive home. I was 30, but my writing had been secretly contaminated by previous travels, by Italy and its cadences, and from then on, in each sentence that I write, there was always, and still is, the unconscious memory of languages loved, languages traversed, English and Italian. When I was offered to have L'Adoration translated into English, it made me deeply happy. I was going to discover other sonorities, another rhythm, other accents. The work with Amanda Gann was intense and joyful. We both journeyed into the meaning and the structure of the language, and we shared our sensations and feelings. I have to admit that I prefer the English version of L'Adoration to the original. French is a flat language. The tonic accents always come at the end of a word. The play, as translated by Amanda Gann, gives me back the subtlety of contrast. The English gives me back the musicality that I dreamt of, the infinite variations. This is, at present, what interests me in writing: how to inhabit a language, how to make of it a territory when one has accepted, as I have, that one has been deprived of a fixed place, of a territory where one could truly know where one is, a territory to call one's own. How to make of it a territory when one has accepted that, after all, it isn't so terrible not to have solid ground, not to possess anything. That this permanent exile, this perpetual motion, this uncertainty are also treasures. This is why I am happy to know that the play is going to be heard by another audience, an American audience, as it happens. You might like it, or you might not. That's another story. That's the freedom of the listener, of the spectator. But it is this relationship to alterity which thrills me. Alterity for me is not to have been born in Haiti and for the play to be read in New York through the lens of the Caribbean. That is not what interests me, really. It isn't geography, it isn't birth, it isn't skin color. What interests me and what captivates me is the complexity of alterity, the undefinable that it carries within it. What interests me is how all of the languages, all of the travels, all of the exiles that make me what I am may resonate with the imaginary of those who will hear the play. How we go toward others, accepting their differences and without pretending to understand them in advance. How we meet one another without preconception in the fragility of discovery. I regret very much that I cannot be there with you tonight. To read the play in English, I will say it again, has been a joy. To hear it carried by the voices of the actress and the actor, in this language that as a teenager I dreamt of inhabiting, to hear it in English would have no doubt been a source of even greater feeling. My warmest thanks to all those who enabled this meeting across the oceans. All best wishes, Jean-René Lemoine.
Thank you, Josh. It's a beautiful letter, very much so, and a great introduction to the author himself. The main ideas are here. He speaks of himself as a writer of exile. And by this, he doesn't mean that he is Haitian, but in France, but really he has what he calls a kaleidoscopic, a shattered identity. He's always in exile. And so the first question that I want to go to Amanda, how did you manage to write a translation that's better than the original?
You'd have to ask him. That was just a translation of what he wrote.
So what is your reaction to what he says?
When I first, I agreed to do the translation without ever reading the play, which is a really foolish thing to do. As an actress, I would never audition for something without asking to see the script first. And then I got it and I thought, wow, this is a very, 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 very French play. But what was exciting to me about it was trying to work within the musicality of it, and I think this staging sort of brought that forward. But we were interested in kind of using the punctuation and the architecture of the French language and imbuing it with a different sort of sound and seeing what happens. So in that case, it was kind of a meeting between grammar and vocabulary and feeling, which I think, or I would like to think, that the combination of any two, or even in this case, multiple languages, would be richer than only one. So that's the only explanation I can give.
Yes, that's beautiful. This is the only play of today where there's no murder at the end. We have mostly, this is a play based on language and kind of an inability to communicate, yet there's a lot of language in it. They talk a lot. And
I remember.
yes, as you put it very well, it's very French indeed. Do you agree that with the author that French compared to the English is a very flat language?
Well, it's funny because when I teach French, I tell my students that French is what is considered linguistically like a non-accentuated language. They're like, but there's so many accents and we don't know where to put them. How is that possible? But that the cadence is very, it's very different. And so there's a kind of emphasis that one can like or not like. But I think we were both very interested in finding a way to have there be a particular type of passion to the English utterances that were strong emotions, where the accent comes very often on the first syllable. And so that can get a bit much when it's people kind of haranguing each other. So I think that was a real challenge to try to keep the way which in the French it sort of flows, even if the texture of the speech is very intense, without it becoming kind of a battering ram.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I found very interesting with this performance tonight is that it is very much in the spirit of the author. For example, the author is exiled, but also in terms of his art. What he does, and a recent play that he did was on Médée, the Greek mythology, the figure. And he wrote a long monologue, and he played it himself. So you have an Haitian-born actor in the 20th century playing a Greek antiquity woman as him. So it's gender fluidity, but it's also genre fluidity. So it's really in that sense. So I found your mise en scène, your staging, to be extremely dreamlike. And I was wondering how you came to that vision.
So a part of the staging was actually inspired by what Jean-René Lemoine describes as this resonance with the imaginary of other people. And so bringing visual art on stage was a way of intensifying in some ways this kind of magnetizing power of the language in the play itself. And there was also this idea of combining works of art from the Western artistic canon. So you've probably recognized L'Extase de Sainte Thérèse by Bernini, a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, a bust by Camille Claudel, a sketch by Géricault, and also some more contemporary and recent visual artists departing, and for that I chose them using the idea of the Museum of the Tout Monde that Edouard Glissant defined, this idea of bringing artists with mobile identity, as Jean-René Lemoine puts it in his letter, and then borrowing from someone like Gabriela Moravec, who is Polish by birth, but who was raised in Venezuela, Ernest Breuler, who is a Martinican, how do you say in English, Martinican, a sculptor, Garout, who is like a famous Haitian painter, and so on and so on. And so this idea was actually to transpose the hybrid inspiration of Jean-René Lemoine, who describes himself as a citizen of the world more than as an Haitian-based artist. And it was also the idea also of showing how the characters in this play cannot tell their story but through the filter of or the framework of recognizable, established, almost cliché images of passion. And that's also there's this dreamlike quality of the play, and there is clearly, and it's in the title itself, of course, like l'adoration, the adoration. There is all this kind of mysticism of passion and love, which is deeply embedded in the language and the images and the poetical dimension and quality of the text itself. So this back and forth that I was trying to create as the experience of the audience between like the visuality and the linguistic quality of the text was a part of the.
Also the dancing, the body,
Absolutely,
the music.
Yes. And so the music is a recent composition by Yvette Jackson, who is an African-American composer, whose idea, I think, and it's directly related to the play, so she wanted to, we discussed which pieces I should use for this play in particular. And she developed like the idea of sound, like the landscape composition, and decided that she was trying to create a sort of visual experience through the audition of music, and using music that could trigger in the imagination various images of like the slave experience and the experience of exile, and so both like the thickness of memory and the thickness of history together. So this is really part of the work of Yvette.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Maybe one last question for Amanda before we open it up to the public. So you are the translator, of course, you're also the actress. You've noticed that as well. And interestingly, your character is also an actress, right? And I read the original French, and for the first time I heard your translation. One line comes up in the original French that resonates with what the author says today. The character says, je suis exilé de moi-même. I am exiled from myself. And I was just wondering how you, as translator, actress, lived that character.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's two different jobs, really, which was slightly difficult because I think part of forgetting all of the work that went into doing the translation was actually important for inhabiting the text as a character and not as like myself, a person who contributed to the way that it was structured. But it's funny, Jean-René, Lemoine and I had talked quite a bit about our backgrounds, but that specific story I heard for the first time in reading the letter, and it was also my own personal story. And so I moved to France when I was very young by choice because I wanted something else. Most of the acting that I ever did was in French until I was about 30, and I moved to England, which was a place that I had barely ever been before. And I ended up working as an actress in England for the first time, and that's where I did some of my playwriting for the first time. So I think that what I connected to in the text is as that character comes from a personal experience of frequent feelings of existential homelessness, and when, at least in a kind of heteronormative contemporary society, having a male person as an anchor point is frequently what is required to be refused by someone one is kind of desperately trying to tether themselves to, makes you twice in exile, I guess. So that's how I read that line.
It resonates very well with the character, very much so. Maybe we should now open to the public if you have any questions.
You want my name? Yes. Okay, my name is Judy Miller. I am not the reporter from the New York Times. I am not the daughter of Jacques Lacan. Okay. But I am myself, not in exile from myself. But anyway,
that's reassuring.
I actually am having trouble speaking right now because I'm trying to figure out what this piece is about, truly. I think it's very dense in a lot of ways, and in other ways, it might not be dense at all. But the staging and the translation and the working through it makes it feel very dense to me and extremely highly metaphorical. So not having read it and not having seen any stage directions or not knowing anything about what Jean-René Lemoine says at the beginning, I have a couple of questions, and Amanda, you must have worked through this. Why are the characters called China and Rodez? Does he say that it has to be a man and a woman? Does he say that it has to be a white woman and a black man? Because all of those things obviously have an impact on how we receive this play.
Yeah, so very simply I asked the question about, so in French there's Chine and Rodez, which Chine is just the word for China. He told me that his mother had a childhood friend who was named that, and he just always liked it. And Rodez is a city in France that very people outside of France would know of. And he...
That's right.
Exactly,
That's
yes.
correct,
So
that's correct, yes.
Precisely. And so the theater of cruelty and Artaud is sort of part of his imaginary as well, so it's a bit of a nod to that. But when I asked him whether he thought I ought to do something else with those names, we decided that what we liked, and this is in the opening stage direction that was read, is that they are from elsewhere. So it connotes a kind of elsewhere-ness to everyone who's going to hear it, both in French and in English. I would say neither of those as names sound like anything in particular, but two places that people may have uncertain affiliations with in English and in French. It does say a man and a woman, but it is an interesting question because I think a lot of his work poses a sort of counterpoint to the way that traditional masculine and feminine characters are portrayed, and I would say this play does as well. But that is in the stage direction, and a man and a woman, and the man has to be Rodez because the Rodez is the one with the bandage, so you couldn't reverse them around based on that stage direction alone. Though it would be interesting to see in practice. And as far as race, there's no mention of race whatsoever in the play at all. And we did, when we were discussing that it was going to be staged at this festival, one of the things specifically that he said was that he had no requirements about the configurations of races of any of the actors.
Sylvain, do you?
So the last question, the white woman and the black man, obviously the staging would have been completely differently if it had happened that my cast was different. So I think that it's indeed like it has a real impact on the way the text and the staging is received by the audience, but the staging would have been different. This is the only thing I can say. That's obviously we started from sort of a fact. The cast was made of a white woman and a man, and so we really thought through that during the rehearsals. Also, the way in which we use the images, because it's going from this kind of objective, neutral eye designed by Leonardo da Vinci to two different eyes. One which is painted by Gabriela Moravec, and which is like this eye with the body of, so which is a photography, sorry, not painted, a photograph representing an eye with a black body within the eye, which is a way to indicate that the way of looking is always racially defined. And the second painting, which is the other eye that appears at the end, which is painted by Ernest Breuler, and which is this eye with the sex of a woman in the center of the eye, which is a way of suggesting that the way you look at bodies are always gendered defined. And I might have chosen different images if the cast had been different.
Any other question?
Thank you. I read first the play in French, and I should say I was completely transported by the text and the vocabulary. And it was not the story of a woman and a man to me. It was just above that. And there was one element that carried me when I was reading the text, is the presence of the sea, the water. And so it was not, I mean, the fact that she is called China, of course you travel, Rodez, I know where it is, you travel, but it took me somewhere else. And kind of subliminal vocabulary, love story that will not work, but that's not the point of the play. So I was wondering I mean, in the letter he wrote, he mentioned the imaginary of the person who is going to listen to the text. So what do you think what would be what do you think his goal is through this text? Is it just this kind of sublime, sorry? Sublimation? Yes, or is there something else? Do you have anything to say?
Do you want to say something, Mama? can just. So my sense is that this play is also like very similar to other plays that Jean-René Lemoine has written, and most of his plays, if you look at another one which is called Face à la mer, so facing the mother, or Vent contraire, contrary winds in Paris, yeah. And so you have like this constant idea that when you are confronted with loss and death, abandonment and solitude, ruptures and disillusion, the only way to escape disappearance, dissolution, the void that China evokes during the play continuously, and that void is actually the sea, I think, in the play. The only way to escape dissolution is actually the recourse to a sort of hemorrhagic language, to a sort of overflowing discourse that finally takes the shape of a ritual. And I think that this is your feeling of sublimation. And so there is this kind of discursive ritual that is that takes place in this kind of interstitial space in the play between the social space of the nightclub, and you have like these traces of music that comes to the terrace all the time, and the void of the sea that they are facing, which is a sort of the gap of silence, some kind of the silence of the human words in some way.
Void is a very harsh word. I mean, and it feels more like a passage to me than void, because void is hard. It's very difficult. I mean, and the play is not that negative.
So what's the word for void in the French version? I forgot.
Vide. Yeah, so I think one of the words that I don't think we have a good one for in English, but which I like very much, is the rosac. So it's the word itself, I think, connotes quite a lot better than like crashing. Seems kind of clunky to me, but rosac is this moment where, to me, the sea, it goes out, and there's a respite in which you might be able to talk out everything you're supposed to talk out, and then suddenly it comes back. And I think the structure of a lot of his texts, and especially this one, is that, and that there's this hope that if the ritual is completed, there will be a kind of resolution, a healing, a co-construction of a shared past and a potential future. But unfortunately, the tide keeps crashing back in. I would say so. No, I think negative and positive is a bit of a sort of a specific framework. I think more a lot of his imagery and a lot of the way he talks about it is the sort of circuitous dancing way in which we attempt to meet, and there are moments, there's sort of glimmers of where that happens, and then it doesn't quite. So more symphonic, I guess, of which the sound of the sea is a part.
And if I may say so, for having read the original and seeing this beautiful performance tonight, it's very French indeed in that sense, is that there's a lot of texts that do not per se communicate. There's no dialogue really, traditional sense of the term, but then those big paragraphs, what they do, they communicate a certain emotion, a certain affect. So it's not void. It's not void, it's a communication of affect through text, but there's certainly no communication, there's no plot. There's no murder in the end, So there is communication to some other extent. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amin, for moderating this wonderful post-performance discussion. Thank you, Sylvaine. Thank you, Amanda, for your wonderful performance. And thank you, audience, for sticking with us until the end. This is the end of the Caribbean Theatre Project's Day 1 run. And so join us tomorrow at 2 o'clock for a panel on Caribbean theatre on international stages, and for 3 more stage readings at 4 p.m., 6 p.m., and 8 p.m.
So we did plan a little reception, but we very much over time. My team normally is already at home, but so I think there, but we could go to a gingerman bar if anybody, if the audience would like to come. We have